The night Christmas died. Picture Christmas Eve. Your entire family gathered in one home. 3 generations laughing, sharing tamales, playing cards under twinkling lights. Children excited about Santa's arrival. The smell of cinnamon and pine filling the air. Now imagine the doorbell rings at 11:30 p.m. An 8-year-old girl screams with joy, "Santa!" and runs to open the door. She opens it, and Santa shoots her in the face. This is not a horror movie premise. This is not fiction. This happened in Covina, California on December 24th, 2008. A man dressed in a full Santa Claus suit walked into a family Christmas party and opened fire with a handgun. Then he pulled out a homemade flamethrower and set the entire house ablaze with everyone inside. 9 people died that night. An entire family nearly wiped out. A little girl permanently scarred. And Christmas would never mean the same thing again for the survivors. The killer? The ex-husband of one of the victims. A man so consumed by rage over his divorce that he planned for months to commit one of the most horrific family annihilation cases in American history. Tonight, we're examining the Covina Christmas Massacre, a case that shows how rejection and narcissism can transform an ordinary man into a monster, and how a holiday of joy became a night of unimaginable terror. Content warning. This case involves extreme violence, mass murder, and the deaths of multiple family members, including children. If you're sensitive to these topics, please consider whether you want to continue. For everyone else, let's begin with a family who thought they were safe in their own home on the holiest night of the year. Act 1. Christmas Eve 2008. December 24th, 2008 started like countless other Christmas Eves across America. Families gathered, food was prepared, excitement built as the day turned to evening. In Covina, California, a quiet suburban city about 22 miles east of downtown Los Angeles, the Ortega family was hosting their annual Christmas Eve celebration. The Ortegas were a large, close-knit Mexican-American family. Joseph and Alicia Ortega, married for 53 years, were the patriarch and matriarch. They had come from Mexico decades earlier, building a life through hard work, faith, and family values. Joseph ran a painting business. Alicia was the heart of the family, the one who cooked, organized gatherings, and held everyone together. Their 5 adult children, 3 sons and 2 daughters, had families of their own now. But Christmas Eve was sacred. Everyone came home. Parents, children, grandchildren, 3 generations under one roof. Nearly 25 people filled the modest home that night. The house buzzed with activity. Children played video games upstairs. Adults talked and laughed in the living room. The kitchen was filled with the smells of traditional Christmas Eve dinner, tamales, the warm scent of spices, the sweetness of holiday treats. Christmas decorations adorned every room. Lights twinkled. Wrapped presents sat beneath the tree. This was what the holidays were supposed to be about: family, togetherness, love. Among the guests was Sylvia Ortega, one of Joseph and Alicia's daughters. Sylvia was known for her calm spirit and generous nature. She was recently divorced, but she wasn't going to let that ruin the family's Christmas. She came to celebrate with her parents, siblings, nieces, and nephews. Her ex-husband's name was Bruce Jeffrey Pardo. The divorce had been finalized just 1 week earlier. It had been contentious and painful, but it was over now, or so Sylvia thought. As the evening progressed, the family gathered for games and conversation. Children grew more excited as bedtime approached. Santa would be coming soon. At 11:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. An 8-year-old girl, we'll call her by her first name only as she was a minor and survivor, squealed with pure childhood joy. "Santa!" she shouted, racing to the front door. In her mind, and perhaps in the minds of other children present, this was the moment they'd been waiting for. Santa Claus was here. Christmas magic was real. She flung open the door. Standing there was indeed a man in a full Santa Claus suit. Red jacket, red pants, white beard, black boots. He looked exactly like Santa should look. But what happened next shattered not just this family's Christmas, but their entire world. Bruce Jeffrey Pardo raised a 9mm handgun and shot the little girl in the face at point-blank range. Act 2, 90 Seconds of Hell. The sound of that first gunshot changed everything instantly. The little girl collapsed, blood sprayed. Her jaw was shattered by the bullet, but in a miracle that defies comprehension, she lived because she had turned her head at the last second. The bullet missed her brain. But there was no time to process what had just happened. Bruce Pardo stepped over the child's body and into the house, gun raised, and began firing systematically at everyone in sight. Screams erupted throughout the home. People who had been laughing seconds earlier were now scrambling for their lives. Some tried to run, some tried to hide, some froze in terror, unable to process that this was real. Pardo moved through the house with deadly efficiency. He wasn't firing wildly. He was targeting people methodically, moving from room to room. Family members fell where they stood. Some were shot multiple times. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the lingering scents of cinnamon and pine. The cheerful Christmas lights illuminated a scene of carnage. Joseph and Alicia Ortega, the beloved grandparents who had built this family, were killed. Their daughters, Sylvia, Pardo's ex-wife and his primary target, was murdered along with her sister. Wait, Letitia survived. Let me correct that. Sylvia was killed along with another sister. 2 of their sons, James and Charles, tried to fight back. When you're faced with an armed intruder murdering your family, adrenaline takes over. These weren't trained fighters. They were ordinary men trying desperately to save their loved ones. They rushed at Pardo. They tried to overpower him, but he was heavily armed and prepared. He shot both brothers, and they stumbled towards the backyard, leaving blood trails as they tried to escape. They both died in the backyard, a place where children had been playing video games just minutes before. Their bodies were found later among the ruins. Upstairs, 17-year-old Michael Ortiz was in his room, likely playing computer games or listening to music with headphones. By the time he realized something was wrong, it was too late. He was trapped upstairs as chaos erupted below. Michael never made it out. His body was found later, burned beyond recognition. Some survivors described trying to hide under the dining room table. Others recalled crawling towards exits, trying to avoid the gunfire. One woman survived by shielding herself with her murdered husband's body after he was shot. The entire shooting rampage lasted perhaps 90 seconds. In that minute and a half, Pardo had shot multiple people, killing several instantly and mortally wounding others. But he wasn't finished. Pardo had come prepared with something even more terrifying than a gun. He pulled out his homemade flamethrower, a pressurized device filled with race fuel designed to spray fire like a blowtorch. He began torching the house. Flames erupted instantly. The accelerant he used was extremely flammable, designed to burn hot and fast. Fire consumed curtains, furniture, decorations. The Christmas tree became an inferno. Wrapped presents melted. The walls caught fire. For those still alive inside, a new nightmare began. They weren't just trying to escape a gunman. They were trying to escape an inferno. Some survivors who had hidden during the shooting now had to flee the flames. They crawled through smoke, burned themselves on hot surfaces, broke through windows. The choice was die by fire or risk being shot trying to escape. Several did escape. Those who made it out ran to neighbors' homes, pounding on doors, screaming for help, calling 911. But for 9 people, there would be no escape. Act 3, the Inferno. By the time the first 911 call was made, the Ortega home was already fully engulfed in flames. Neighbors described seeing fire shooting nearly 50 feet into the night sky. The house had become a towering inferno, visible from blocks away. This wasn't a normal house fire. This was an accelerant-fueled blaze designed to destroy everything. The Covina Fire Department responded immediately, but they faced a nightmare scenario. This was Christmas Eve. Many firefighters were with their own families. Resources had to be mobilized quickly. The fire was massive and spreading fast, and the worst of all, there were reports of people still trapped inside. It took more than 80 firefighters over an hour to bring the blaze under control. They attacked it from multiple angles, pouring thousands of gallons of water onto the structure. But the house was already lost. The heat was so intense that it melted the siding of nearby homes. Cars parked in the driveway were destroyed. The Christmas lights that had twinkled so cheerfully hours before were now melted plastic and twisted wire. As firefighters finally gained control and began to search the ruins, they made horrific discoveries. Bodies were found throughout the house, some in the living room where the shooting had started, some in the dining room where people had tried to hide, some near exits where they had tried to escape. The fire had burned so intensely that many victims were charred beyond recognition. Investigators couldn't initially count how many bodies were present. Identification would require dental records, medical histories, and the process of elimination. Inside the ruins, they found the remnants of Christmas, charred decorations, melted ornaments, the skeletal remains of furniture. The dining table where 5 family members had tried to hide was now just ash and twisted metal. Joseph and Alicia Ortega, married for 53 years, were found together. They had died in their own home, surrounded by their family on Christmas Eve. Their daughters, Sylvia Alicia Jr. and another sister, were found near each other. Sylvia, the primary target of Pardo's rage, had been murdered for the crime of divorcing him. The 2 sons who had tried to fight back, James and Charles, were found in the backyard. Blood trails showed their desperate attempt to escape after being shot. They had crawled as far as they could before succumbing to their injuries. 17-year-old Michael Ortiz was found upstairs, his body burned beyond recognition. He had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, a teenager enjoying Christmas Eve who became collateral damage in his uncle by marriage's revenge plot. 2 daughters-in-law were also among the dead. One had hidden under the dining table with others before the fire consumed them. Another died beside her husband. The final death toll? 9 people. An entire family nearly wiped out in a single night of rage. But against all odds, the little girl who opened the door survived. Shot through the jaw, she lived because she had turned her head at the split second the bullet fired. The wound was devastating. Her jaw was shattered, requiring extensive reconstructive surgery, but she lived. Other survivors included those who had been far from the initial gunfire, those who escaped through windows, and one woman who survived by hiding under her murdered husband's body until the shooter left. As dawn broke on Christmas morning, the Ortega home was a smoking pile of rubble. 9 bodies lay inside, and the killer had vanished. Act 4. The Monster in the Santa Suit, 1430 to 18 minutes. While firefighters battled the blaze and survivors gave statements to police, investigators began piecing together who had done this and why. The survivors' descriptions were consistent. A man in a Santa Claus suit had rung the doorbell, shot the child who answered, and then systematically murdered as many people as possible before setting the house on fire. Police immediately focused on one name, Bruce Jeffrey Pardo. Multiple witnesses identified him. Sylvia's recent divorce from Pardo was well known to the family, and his absence from the scene while having motive and opportunity made him the prime suspect. Officers rushed to Pardo's known addresses. They checked his home in Montrose, California. They looked for his vehicle. They put out an all-points bulletin. But Bruce Pardo had planned carefully. He wasn't at home. His car wasn't where it should be. He had seemingly vanished. Near the Ortega home, police found important evidence, a blue Dodge Caliber rental car. Inside were maps, significant amounts of cash, food, water, spare clothing, and other supplies. This was a getaway kit. Pardo had planned to flee after the attack. He had envisioned driving away, possibly to an airport, possibly across state lines, possibly to disappear completely. But his plan had already failed in a crucial way.
When Pardo ignited his homemade flamethrower inside the house, the device had malfunctioned or backfired. The pressurized fuel exploded, severely burning his arms and legs. The Santa suit he wore had melted into his skin in places. This wasn't part of his plan. He had intended to burn down the house, yes, but not to burn himself in the process. The injuries were agonizing and immediately obvious. He couldn't walk into an airport or a hotel looking like this. His escape was compromised. Additionally, police found melted fragments of the Santa suit fused to the sidewalk outside the home, physical evidence of the explosion that had burned him. Shell casings from a 9mm handgun littered the floor of the home. Pardo had fired numerous rounds, methodically shooting his victims. But where was he now? The answer would come early Christmas morning from an unexpected location 40 miles away. Act 5, the final act, 18 minutes to 21 minutes. Bruce Pardo didn't make it far. Burned, bleeding, and in excruciating pain, he drove his brother's car approximately 40 miles north to Sylmar, California, where his brother lived. We don't know exactly what conversation, if any, occurred between the brothers. What we do know is that Bruce Pardo, humiliated by his burns, defeated by his failed escape plan, and facing certain capture, made a final decision. Inside his brother's home in the early hours of Christmas morning, Bruce Pardo used the same 9mm handgun he had used to murder 9 people, and he shot himself in the head. When police found his body later that day, they discovered several disturbing details. Pardo was wearing a girdle, a compression garment, packed with $17,000 in cash. He had apparently planned to flee the country, or at least disappear for an extended period. The cash was his travel fund, his survival fund, his means of starting over somewhere far from the consequences of his actions. He had wrapped his legs in plastic, likely trying to protect or treat the severe burns from the flamethrower explosion. The Santa suit had melted into his skin in places, causing horrific injuries that would have required immediate medical attention. But Pardo couldn't seek medical help without being caught, and being caught meant facing what he had done. So he chose suicide over accountability. In his rental car and at his home in Montrose, police found additional evidence that painted a picture of extensive premeditation. Explosives were discovered in the rental vehicle, suggesting he may have planned even more destruction or had contingencies if his initial plan failed. At his home, investigators found what one detective described as a virtual bomb factory: chemicals, weapons components, blueprints, and materials for making incendiary devices. This wasn't a spontaneous breakdown. This was months of planning, preparation, and obsession. Pardo also found receipts and records showing his purchases in the weeks leading up to the massacre. Handguns and ammunition, the flamethrower components, a custom Santa Claus suit, plane tickets out of state that he never used. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. Bruce Pardo had been planning this massacre for a long time. He had researched, purchased, constructed, and prepared. He had chosen Christmas Eve specifically because he knew the entire family would be gathered. He dressed as Santa Claus to gain entry and to mock the holiday itself. This was not a crime of passion. This was calculated, cold-blooded revenge. Act 6. Who was Bruce Jeffrey Pardo? 21 minutes to 24:30 minutes. To understand how someone could commit such an atrocity, we need to understand who Bruce Jeffrey Pardo was before he became a mass murderer. To most people who knew him, Bruce Pardo seemed like an ordinary man, even successful. He worked as an electrical engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, a prestigious position that required intelligence and security clearance. He was educated, professional, well-spoken. To neighbors, he was unremarkable, quiet, kept to himself, nothing that raised red flags. To coworkers, he was charming enough, competent at his job, someone you might have a casual conversation with but wouldn't necessarily become close friends with. But beneath this ordinary exterior, Bruce Pardo was deeply troubled. In the months leading up to the massacre, Bruce's life unraveled significantly. First, he lost his job at NASA. He was fired for falsifying time records, claiming he had worked hours that he hadn't actually worked. This was not just an embarrassment, but a devastating blow to his identity. Working at JPL was prestigious. Losing that job meant losing status, respect, and his sense of self-worth. Then came the divorce. Bruce had married Sylvia, and for a time, the marriage appeared stable from the outside. But behind closed doors, things were deteriorating. The couple separated, and Sylvia filed for divorce. The divorce was finalized on December 18, 2008, exactly 1 week before the massacre. The divorce settlement required Bruce to pay Sylvia over $10,000 in spousal support. He refused. He saw this as an injustice, as Sylvia taking what wasn't rightfully hers, as another humiliation on top of losing his job. Friends and acquaintances later reported that in the months before the attack, Bruce became increasingly bitter and obsessed. He talked constantly about being wronged. He expressed anger about the divorce, about the financial settlement, about what he perceived as unfair treatment. Some people who knew him said he talked about revenge, though at the time they didn't take it seriously. People say things when they're angry and hurt. Most don't actually act on those thoughts. But Bruce Pardo was different. He wasn't just venting, he was planning. Psychologists who have analyzed the case posthumously suggest that Pardo exhibited classic narcissistic personality traits. He was deeply concerned with his image and status. He couldn't handle rejection or perceived failure. Divorce wasn't just a separation to him, it was public humiliation, a statement to the world that he had failed. And to a narcissist, humiliation is unforgivable. Pardo couldn't accept that the divorce was his
or that Sylvia had legitimate reasons to leave. In his mind, she was the villain. Her family supported her, which made them complicit. They needed to be punished. His plan wasn't just murder, it was annihilation. He wanted to erase Sylvia's entire family, to destroy their joy, to turn Christmas, their most sacred family holiday, into a symbol of terror and loss. The Santa suit wasn't just a disguise to gain entry to the home, it was mockery, it was desecration. It was Bruce Pardo saying, "You celebrate family and love? I'm going to make you fear this holiday forever." This is the psychology of family annihilation, a specific type of mass murder where someone targets an entire family unit. It's almost always committed by men. It's almost always rooted in some form of domestic conflict, divorce, custody battles, perceived betrayal. And it's almost always about control. When someone like Bruce Pardo loses control over their life, losing their job, their marriage, their status, they seek to regain control through violence. If they can't control their own life, they'll control who lives and who dies. Incitement. The eventual fire went out. The bodies were removed. The investigation concluded. But for the survivors, the nightmare was just beginning. 9 people were dead. An entire family had been devastated. And it was Christmas. For the rest of their lives, every Christmas would be colored by this trauma. How do you celebrate a holiday where your loved ones were murdered? How do you enjoy Christmas lights when you remember them illuminating carnage? How do you hear Santa Claus is coming to town without thinking about the monster who dressed as Santa to kill your family? The little girl who answered the door survived her gunshot wound, but the injury required extensive reconstructive surgery. Her jaw had been shattered. She endured multiple operations and years of recovery. But remarkably, she didn't let it destroy her. As she grew up, she became an advocate against gun violence. She used her story to raise awareness, to push for change, to ensure that her trauma could potentially prevent others from experiencing similar violence. That takes incredible strength, to transform your worst moment into a mission to help others. Letitia, one of Sylvia's sisters, survived by hiding under the dining room table and calling 911. She had to lie still, surrounded by dying family members, while fire consumed the house around her. She managed to escape and survived. In the years since, Letitia has rebuilt her life through what she describes as defiance, not hatred. She refuses to let Bruce Pardo's actions define her or destroy what remains of her family. The Ortega family members made a collective decision. Bruce Pardo wanted to erase them, to destroy their family bonds, to make Christmas a day of mourning. They refused to give him that victory.
Every Christmas, the family still gathers. They exchange gifts, they share meals, they tell stories about Joseph and Alicia, about Sylvia, about James and Charles, about Michael, about all 9 people who were taken that night. They visit the cemetery together, they remember, they mourn, but they also celebrate, because staying together, maintaining their family traditions, refusing to let fear and grief destroy them, is the ultimate rejection of what Bruce Pardo tried to do. This is resilience. This is courage. This is how families survive the unsurvivable. The Covina community was also deeply affected. This wasn't a shooting in some distant city. This was their neighborhood, their community, families they knew or knew of. The psychological impact rippled through Covina and surrounding areas. Many people struggled with feelings of vulnerability. If a family could be massacred in their own home on Christmas Eve, was anyone truly safe? Parents had to explain to children why someone would dress as Santa to hurt people. Therapists worked overtime helping community members process the trauma. For law enforcement and first responders, this case took a heavy toll. The firefighters who responded found themselves battling not just a fire, but a crime scene with multiple bodies. Paramedics treated survivors with devastating injuries. Police officers had to notify families and investigate one of the worst massacres in California history. Many of these first responders required counseling and support to process what they had witnessed. Conclusion: questions that haunt us. The Covina Christmas Massacre forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about violence, revenge, and the darkness that can hide behind ordinary facades. Bruce Jeffrey Pardo wasn't a career criminal. He wasn't diagnosed with severe mental illness. He wasn't someone people would have predicted would commit mass murder. He was an engineer, a neighbor, an ex-husband, an ordinary man who became a monster. What does that tell us? That evil can wear a normal face, that danger can come from people we'd never suspect, that rejection, humiliation, and narcissism can combine into deadly rage. Could this have been prevented? That's the question that haunts survivors, law enforcement, and anyone who studies this case. Pardo made purchases that, in hindsight, seem like obvious red flags: guns, ammunition, flamethrower components. But millions of people buy guns legally. Purchases alone don't predict violence. He talked about revenge and being wronged, but millions of people vent about their ex-spouses. Words alone don't predict action. He lost his job and went through a bitter divorce, but millions of people experience these losses without murdering anyone. There's no simple answer, no obvious point where someone should have intervened, no clear red line that was crossed before December 24th. And that's terrifying, because it means that sometimes evil can plan in plain sight, and we won't recognize it until it's too late. The Covina Christmas Massacre stands as one of the most horrific family annihilation cases in American history. 9 innocent people murdered, dozens more traumatized, a community forever changed. All because one man couldn't accept that his marriage ended. Bruce Pardo ended lives, but he couldn't destroy the bonds that held the Ortega family together. He wanted to erase their joy. Instead, their resilience, their refusal to surrender to fear and grief, became his ultimate defeat. The Ortega family continues. They remember their dead, support their survivors, and maintain their traditions. Christmas still comes every year, and every year they gather, scarred but unbroken. What kind of man plans a massacre for Christmas? A weak man who couldn't handle rejection, a narcissist who valued his ego more than human life, a coward who chose violence over accountability. What kind of family survives such horror and still finds a way to celebrate life? The Ortega family. Strong, resilient, undefeated. Conclusion: if this case has affected you, and it should, I want you to take action right now. First, remember the victims. Say their names: Joseph Ortega, Alicia Ortega, Sylvia Ortega, James Ortega, Charles Ortega, Michael Ortiz, and the 3 others whose families deserve to have their loved ones remembered. These weren't just statistics. They were parents, children, siblings, grandparents. They gathered for Christmas because they loved each other. Remember them. Second, if you're going through a difficult divorce or separation, please seek healthy support. Talk to a therapist, join a support group, reach out to friends, process your anger and pain in ways that don't harm yourself or others. And if you know someone going through a divorce who is expressing concerning thoughts about revenge or violence, take it seriously. Report it. Intervene. Better to overreact than to ignore warning signs. Third, if you're a survivor of domestic violence or family violence, know that resources exist to help you. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233, operates 24/7. You are not alone. You deserve safety and support. Fourth, support gun violence prevention efforts. Whatever your views on the Second Amendment, we can all agree that someone planning a mass murder shouldn't be able to easily acquire weapons. Advocate for red flag laws, background checks, and other measures that might prevent tragedies like this. Now, about this channel, Dark HR Stories. Hit that subscribe button right now. We deep dive into the most disturbing, complex, and important true crime cases every single week. Cases that demand attention, cases where the truth needs to be told, cases that show us the darkest capabilities of human nature and the brightest examples of human resilience. Smash the like button to tell YouTube this content matters, that the Ortega family story deserves to reach more people, that we won't forget what happened on Christmas Eve 2008. Turn on notifications by hitting that bell icon. Be there when we drop the next case. These stories need witnesses. These victims need voices. Be one of them. Leave a comment below and tell me what disturbed you most about this case. The premeditation, the Santa suit, the family's resilience, the fact that evil can hide behind an ordinary facade. Your comments help drive discussion and help others process these difficult stories. Share this video, post it to true crime communities, Reddit threads, Facebook groups. Someone needs to hear this story. Someone needs to remember the Ortega family. Someone might even learn something that prevents a future tragedy. Check out our full playlist of family annihilation and mass murder cases, each one examining not just what happened, but why and what it reveals about violence, society, and human psychology. And here's something important. If you're struggling with dark thoughts, anger, or plans to hurt yourself or others, stop right now. Call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 988. Call a crisis counselor. Tell someone. There is always another way. Always. Violence is never the answer to pain. Revenge doesn't heal wounds. Murder doesn't solve problems. It only creates more victims, more trauma, more grief. Bruce Pardo thought violence would give him power. Instead, it made him pathetic, a man so weak he could only feel strong by murdering innocent people. True strength is what the Ortega family showed, surviving, rebuilding, refusing to let hate win. Be like them, not like him. Remember, evil exists, but so does resilience. Darkness is real, but it cannot extinguish the light of human connection, family bonds, and the refusal to surrender to hate. The Ortega family gathers every Christmas. They remember their dead, celebrate their living. They chose love over fear, connection over isolation, hope over despair. That's how you defeat a monster.
Not by fighting violence with violence, but by refusing to let violence destroy what matters most. Thank you for watching, for remembering, and for standing with survivors. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and never underestimate the power of family and resilience in the face of unspeakable evil. Justice never sleeps. Neither do we.